welcome everybody. Is the first thing I want to say. You know, this is the Ludlow Community Garden and compost site. It is both the compost and the garden are approved extension projects from the University of Vermont. So if there are any Master Gardener interns out there or composters out there that need hours, this is one site that you can get those hours taken care of. So the garden itself has been here for about 20 years. We have about 50 plots. I think we have about 35 gardeners this year, because some have double plots. They'll take two. It's all organic, and it's just in a wonderful spot. We have water, it's fenced in, and those are just two huge things for community gardens. They're huge. There's a pond up on the hill that gravity feeds the water down to the gardens. The compost system that we have here, this system here that's fenced in right here is the food waste composting part of our project. Outside is the non-food waste part of the project. And we're going to go through, there's 5 different ways that we have here that you can choose to compost. So people have come and they've picked and choose what's best for them at home or for their school or even their community. We had the Bethel Community Garden down here a couple weeks ago. We had Weston here a few weeks ago. They're trying to start a community garden. Windsor came down, they started a composting system in Windsor, and they came down and I worked with them, getting them ideas and helping them get off the ground. So that's what we're all about here. With the food waste part of it, we don't really need this volume to support the garden. This is more of an educational piece. So I'm going to start outside here and show you this first compost system, which is really the meat and potatoes of things. So this is cold composting. This is not a hot composting system. There's no food waste out here. What we have is we have a 3-year cycle. Year 1, year 2, year 3. So this pile right now is active. As you can see, this is what the gardeners are throwing on as they work their plots. This is brand new. Early this spring I came down with the tractor and rotated the piles around, so there was nothing here in April. In mid-April, this was bare ground. So this is all brand new stuff, and it's already starting to break down inside. It's just amazing. But this is already starting to break down, but it's cold composting. It's a slow process. We don't really do much with this through the year. Just tell the gardeners to throw it on. No plastic, no trash. And when they clean their garden beds in the fall, this pile can get pretty big. So we put it here so it's easy and convenient. We have a lot of elderly gardeners, and we didn't, when I came here, they had a very complex system of pallets lined up like little boxes and trails and paths and different colors, and blue meant this and green meant that and red meant that, and you had to come up the hill here with a wheelbarrow and get into this maze of stuff. And I thought it was, I didn't think it flowed well. So we started changing it, and I came up with this. So this is a really simple system. So this year's garden waste is going here. It's that simple. In the spring, I come down with the tractor, and I'm going to take this pile and put it there. And I'm going to take this pile and put it here. And this will be bare ground again, ready for another season of new material. So when I put this pile here in the spring, I combined it with some wood chips. And we get the wood chips from a local tree company. If they're in the area, they'll come by and drop a load for us. It helps them out a little bit, and we love the wood chips. We also get some goat manure from a local farm. That pile would be to the right of the wood chips. It's vacant right now. So if there's a little goat manure there, some wood chips, I'll mix it up with this. The goat manure speaks for itself because of the nitrogen value and so on, but the wood chips will give it aeration, and aeration is really important for composting. So this pile here, which we made in April, is just sitting here slowly breaking down, and you can see what that's starting to look like. I mean, you could actually use this at this point. So, I mean, that's just beautiful stuff. We'll let it cook. We'll let it sit here. We don't mess with it. I just pull the Japanese knotweed out, which is right
I see
here.
that.
That stuff, all those rhizomes flying right over here. So that'll just sit all year. And then we pull it over here. So I might mix this up with a few things depending on what ingredients are here. But I like the wood chips to add bulk to it as well as aeration. Air is just key to having good compost. So it's just passive. It's passive composting. It doesn't get hot. This is this year's. Now this is ready to go on the gardens. It's off, maybe even a little past. It's still composty, but it's getting closer to topsoil. You see this, if we just leave this here, eventually it'll just be a pile of topsoil. But you can still see there's wood chips in there, and this is still pretty good stuff. You can't buy this at Aubuchon, I can tell you that. And this is for the gardeners to help themselves. So this is what they're putting on their beds. And in the fall, I'll encourage them to, you know, make this pile go away. Put it all on your beds. It's a great time to put it on, let it sit for the winter, and be ready to go in the spring. So remember, compost is not fertilizer. Fertilizer is fertilizer. This can become fertilizer. It's getting close to being so. But compost feeds the soil, and the soil feeds the plants. So it's that connection. So if you have a nice big pile of compost, it's not fertilizer. It's food for the soil. And then the soil is food for the plant. So this is really the meat and potatoes of the compost system that feeds the garden. That's how we work it. It's very simple. It's easily accessible for the gardeners. And in, 1, 2, 3 years, this is our product. And all I do is move these piles once a year. I think it's cool.
Amazingly simple.
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
So let's go look at the food. So I think around 2015 we got a grant from the New England Environmental Fund to put in a food composting. They were, the Vermont law was starting to get attention. Southern Windsor County Solid Waste District got involved. A lot of people got involved with this because compost was coming. The law was coming, and people, didn't know what to do, and so on and so forth. So we got a nice grant from them to build this. And I designed this to be really simple. If anybody's taken the Master Composter course, I know you guys have, there's a little blurb in it about a composting system in Brooklyn, New York. And it was the simplest little setup going, but it worked wonderfully for these folks. And I'm thinking, what a great idea. Brooklyn, New York, you'd think it would just be tons of chaos and mountains of stuff, and how could they possibly control it? But they did it really simply. And I kind of incorporated that idea into this. So we wanted to make this, I hate the term, but we wanted to make it user-friendly, we wanted to make it simple, and we wanted to make it work. And we wanted to have some ideas in here so people could see different ways to compost. You've already seen one way. You can do that at home. That's what we do at my house. I have this system here. And I have a tumbler too, but we're going to talk about that in a sec. So the system that we have here is pretty straightforward. This is only for the gardeners that are members here and their families. So their job when they bring compost in is just simply to put it in the buckets right here. That's it. That's their job. That's all they have to do. That's all we want them to do. So they come along and they drop their compost in the bucket and they're finished. In our bio bags. So in here there's 4 different ways to choose how to compost. We don't want the gardeners in the bins and stuff because the bins are, right now we're working the recipes. Are you familiar with the term, the recipes? That's your carbon and nitrogen ratios, water, air, all that stuff. And we're working certain chambers and not others. So Marcia and Ken and I know what each other is doing if they come here, but I don't want 35 gardeners out into this stuff. It'll just be too much. So first thing is we have this sign here just informing people what is and what isn't acceptable. Simple, but it helps. Somebody asked about grass clippings and flowers, commercial flowers. We don't particularly want them because they could have chemicals in them that we don't want in our food. Because theoretically, we're going to eat this stuff sooner or later. It's going to come through those plants. So we put this up just to give people an idea of what's going on. Signage is always good. The system they had in Brooklyn was basically cans like this, bigger cans, of course. And they had 5 or 6 of them, and one can would say, you know, dried grass, or this clippings, or, you know, food waste, or blah, blah, blah. And people could just come and pick the can to what's best for what they had that day. So that worked kind of, I just thought it was a simple system, so we kind of incorporated that idea here. So the first thing I think we'll talk about is just our record keeping here. So the composters record everything that we do. And I'm just going to pull this out so we can take a look and you can get a film on this. So this first sheet says that it's for the hot frog tumbler, which is this tumbler here. We'll talk about that first. So we've been working the hot frog. Right behind it, I have a sheet for the aero bin, which is that big green box right there, because I've been working that last couple weeks. So what we're going to do is we're going to write down what we do. So if Ken comes down and he, you know, this thing has been bugging me. So if Ken comes down and he adds something or does something on one of the chambers, and then Marcia comes along, she knows what's going on. So I'll put my glasses on here and we'll take a peek. We can see that on May 2nd, when we opened up the site here, we started with the right side of the aero bin. This little tumbler has 2 chambers, a left and right side. So on May 2nd, we started on the right side with 2 buckets of food compost. We added 2 quarts of sawdust. I'll show you that in a sec. And we inoculated it. And then every time we added something or did something, we wrote it down. And then on 6/11, Marcia came along and switched over to the left side of this chamber because the right side was full and we wanted to switch over to the other side and start using that. So when I came by, I knew that she had done that, and I said, oh, well, I'm not going to add to the right side because we're going to let that break down now and become compost. And we're going to start working on the left side. Make sense? So if Ken came along, he'd know the same exact thing. So these types of records are simple, but they're really, really important if you have more than one manager on the compost site. And you guys probably, you know, I imagine Rutland, you might have more than one person involved. But you want it to be clear as to what each is doing. So when we started the site, we said we added inoculant. And what that means is to get your recipe going, you have to kind of kickstart it. So I went out to the next year's compost pile. I grabbed a handful of that nice stuff from the middle there and chucked it into that chamber. And I just added a couple gazillion billion bacteria, fungus, the whole 9 yards.
Like sourdough starter.
There you go. It's like yeast. And you get it going. And so that started going. And that jump starts it.
How's it doing?
It's
Good.
it's cooling off a little bit now, but this is warming up. Okay, so here's our plan for this. You guys can come in if you want. It's fine. So this, we're going to start with this little tumbler right here. We have 2 tumblers. This is a Jora, J-O-R-A, and this is called a hot frog. both of them have 2 chambers, and I think a 2-chamber system makes a lot of sense. As again, you know, once one's breaking down, you can start working the other one, especially for a home. My daughter has this particular one at her first grade school class. The little kids can reach it and they can tumble it and they think it's a cat's meow. So they're making their compost with a hot frog. Nice thing about hot frog is they're cheap. This is about $100, maybe 120 bucks. And we've had this now for 5 years and have absolutely no problem with it at all. It works great. So we're letting this cook and break down to where it's not food anymore. And once it gets to a certain point where it's not food, I added a bunch of water here the other day. It's a little gooey. And we'll let it sit in there for a little while longer. But once it's really not food anymore, it's not compost yet, but it's not food either. Then we add it to bin 1, right here. Now this is our system, and there's all kinds of different ways to do this. You can't do it wrong. Whatever works for you is correct. And you know, you'll find things that, oh, it smells, or it's too wet, or it's too dry. You can change the recipe and fix that. So this is probably a little too wet. So I'd probably want to add some carbon to this. So I'd come over here into our barrel and get maybe a little quart thing of, we use shaved wood chips here. And if you choose to use, this is the kind of stuff they use for bedding in a chicken coop or something. You could get up at Garland's for like $6 for a bale. Last year, pretty much all summer, because it's dense. You want to get shavings that are not hardwood. So get softwood like pine or spruce or something. They'll break down a lot quicker. So we'll just take it and pop it in there, and that'll suck up a bunch of that water. So I just adjusted.
Does the pH matter at all in compost?
Not really.
No, when you put it on the bed?
No, not really, because by the time it gets broken down and stuff,
Right.
and it gets to be this, it's not, that is premium stuff right there. And this was a pretty good pile, and the gardeners have, you know, we told them to come and get it, so they've been coming and getting it. So what we want to do here is we want to get this chamber down so it's not food anymore, because we don't want varmints to come in. So whatever it is, it's not tasty to anybody or anything. So raccoons, skunks, bears, they're not interested. And that's our problem here. Now in an urban site, you're gonna still have to deal with raccoons, skunks, rats maybe, vermin. Those are issues that, you know, you're gonna have to address. But here we just don't want, I don't want a bear coming in here going, wow, you know, look at this. Yeah.
How much of the food scraps can you put into a chamber as you're building the recipe?
It's amazing. Come on up here and take a look at this chamber. When we stopped, when Marcia switched over, this chamber here, when Marcia switched over to the left side, you couldn't put anything in there. You probably couldn't put a peanut in there. It was packed. So in a few weeks, it's half full. So we just packed, and this one was packed the other day. Somebody dumped a whole bucket full of peanut shells in here, and I says, you know, for fun, I'm just going to dump them in as a carbon source and see what it does. Will it work? Will it not work? I don't know. We'll find out. So it's cooking. It's starting to cook. This was the temperature on this was about 75 degrees on Wednesday when I took it. So I added a little more inoculant in here. I had a whole thing of peanut shells, maybe another bag or two of compost or food scraps, and the temperature now is up, you know, 100 and, well, it was 110 a little bit ago. So it's starting to cook. It's starting to get going now.
What is the temperature that you're looking for?
So you're looking for about 130 in that area, 135. To kill pathogens and bad stuff, you probably want to keep that temperature for about 3 days. And then it'll start to calm down and probably hang around 100, 110 in that area for maybe a week, week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. And then it'll just get cooler and cooler and cooler. So I added a little inoculant. I put the peanut shells in there, added some water, and I said, I wonder what's going to happen. Well, it's cooking. this is going now. So I'm thinking we'll be done with the hut frog for the time being. We're gonna close it off and switch to this.
So how do you get it out of here?
I dump it on the ground and then I make Ken clean it up. No, I don't.
I get in there with a shovel. I mean, a little garden
You mean
shovel.
just turn it till it falls out?
Yeah. This one you can get a bucket or something under it, you know, so a little taller, but this one's
Or maybe a tarp or something.
the grass loves it.
Like a tarp under it, Ken, and just
Yeah.
let it fall on the tarp.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
Or you get your grain scoop under there. That'll take care of it.
So we're going to switch over to the Ura now, and the Ura is a much larger chamber, as you can see.
Is it the same concept?
Same exact concept. It's identical. The thing with the Ura is they're expensive. This is the mid-size one. They have 3 models. This is the medium-size one, and this one goes for 300 plus.
Ooh.
Is there stuff in there?
Just leftovers from last year. It's insulated with styrofoam because the claim is that you can compost in cold weather because of this. I don't think so.
You think?
Yeah, I don't think so. Maybe in North Carolina you can get away with it, but not up here. It freezes solid, and you know, this or not. But it has a nice big chamber. It's easy to spin. You know, it's got tons of handles on it to spin around. So we're going to switch to this one. We're going to do that right now. So what we're going to do, we'll go to the right side of this. I'm going to come over here and get some compost or some food waste. Now we use bio bags, and we encourage all of our gardeners to use bio bags. In the field, right here, gardeners just can come in and help themselves to bio bags. Take them home, have a supply at home, and bring your stuff back with bio bags.
And you put it right into the bin, scraps and bags.
That would be appealing to a lot of people. That would be appealing to a lot of people.
Yeah, again, you know, the whole thing is make it easy, make it workable. So I like to cut the bag a little bit, just to loosen up some of this stuff. Composting is a messy job. And I like to cut these knots up, where they knot it, because they'll hang around for a while. So we'll get that in there.
What are the bags made out of?
You know, I don't know, but I can tell you that there are compostable bags that aren't. So you have to be careful what you buy. You know, do your research, look at the reviews, make sure whatever you purchase for bio bags actually break down well. Because there are some out there that it's all about nature, but they don't break down very well.
Right.
Where do you get the supply for here?
We get them online. Rosa, one of the garden coordinators, buys them. I'll email you and tell you where to get them.
Then you can
So she buys them, and I'm not quite sure where exactly she gets them.
I don't know how good the ones are from I get some at Hannaford. They sell them at Hannaford. Yeah.
Are they-
But I don't know how
Will
good
they
they
break
are.
down?
I haven't started composting with them yet, so.
I have ordered online, and I've also gotten them from the solid waste district. Or actually, no. When my garbage was being picked up, I got it from my
Marsha,
supplier,
want to get a cup of
and they would have
Inoculant?
only that.
Hannaford I tried, and they almost composted before they made it to the compost.
Oh, is that right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
I guess they work okay then.
well, that's pliable.
But what I do is I keep them in the freezer until I'm ready to.
Yeah.
The compost itself.
The food scraps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I keep them in the freezer. That way they don't stink the whole place up. Especially with weather coming like we've got coming.
Thank
I
you.
think they also break down better too.
Huh?
If they're frozen and then you thaw it, it breaks down better.
Probably does.
Yeah. It
Yeah,
does.
the ice crystals will break the cells down.
Yeah.
So we're going to take, Marcia just got a cup of compost, and we're about to introduce a couple gazillion billion microorganisms to this. And they're going to just start chowing down on that. So I want to add a little bit of carbon. I put about 3 bags in. I'm going to start probably with a cup of carbon. And again, this is, you know, the recipes say 3 to 1. Some will say 2 to 1. You know, there are some composters that go, yeah, 2 to 1's fine. And I actually believe that, but depends on your carbon source. Some carbon is way denser than others. So if you're using hay, you might use a lot more hay to get the same ratio than you would with a cup of this, which is very dense. So just a heads up. And how do you know? Fool around with it. If it stinks, if it smells like ammonia, you have too much nitrogen. If it stinks, you have too much or not enough of something. So you don't want it to smell. So anybody's welcome to stick their nose in there, but there's no odor whatsoever in there. None. And we've never had a complaint from any gardeners saying, oh, you know, boy, it really stunk up there on the old compost site the other day. It just doesn't. So if it smells, it's either too much nitrogen or too much carbon, or not enough of something, or too wet or something. If it's too wet, you'll see it. Yeah. You'll know.
How often does this get turned?
You know, I'm going to say we, because you're part of this. We probably turn it too much. You really only need to turn these. Once they start heating up, probably let it sit for a week without turning it.
Yeah.
And even longer, it's fine. Because remember, you can do hot composting in bins. A lot of people do. I just find that challenging in Vermont because we have so many. I can't do it at home because we have bears and coyotes and we got it all. And you know, just to throw food in here, I have tried it. And I come out the next morning, the food's all over the place. You know, they didn't touch the carbon, but the food is scattered everywhere. And you know, you try putting more food in the next day with a lot more carbon on it, and then horse manure on top of that. Come out the next day, food's all over the place, you know. So I use this system at home. I want to break it down so it's not food anymore. So again, this stuff here is not attractive to anybody or anything. It's not. So then we can take it and cure it. And by curing it, we're going to pop it in bin number 1 here. So bin number 1 is compost that's not quite ready to go into the finished bin. You can see some of these bags haven't broke down yet. So what we tend to do is just put them in and run them through again. So you know, you might get into the curing stage and there might be a corn cob in there or a piece of pineapple, stuff that hasn't. Throw it back in, run it through the system again. The system is going to eventually win. And that stuff is going to come out eventually like this. All of this stuff was in bin number 1 a while ago. And that's ready to go on a garden bed right there. That's finished stuff. There's actually more in there than you think once you get it around from the edges. And if we find some stuff that hasn't gone through, again, see there's a knot right there. Those knots are a little harder to break down. Throw it back in, run it through again. So the next thing we'd do, and I'll do this after we finish up, I'll record what just happened here. So that if these guys come down, they're going to see that, oh, we switched over to the Jura and we're working the right side. And their job is to open it and take a look in there and go, oh, it looks pretty dry, I'm going to add a little water. Or it's a little wet, I'm going to add a little extra carbon. Or I'm just going to empty the barrels and add a quart or 2 of shavings with it.
You ever use shredded leaves or leaves for your carbon?
You can, yeah. The best is shredded leaves if you have a chipper and you can shred them. Because leaves are the perfect food. There's nothing better than a leaf because it's pure food for a tree. And if you can shred them and chip them up, the problem with a bin pile of leaves is they get anaerobic, you know, if it's not shredded. And so there's no air and they mat up and they just sit there forever. But leaves they're fantastic. Experiment. You know, you can't do it wrong unless you're using some toxic Roundup or something. You can't do it wrong. So, you know, I'm experimenting with that great big green box right there, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So the Euro is ready to go. It has its inoculant. It has 3 or 4 bags of fresh food waste. We threw in some sawdust. I don't think it needs water right now because the food waste probably has a lot of moisture in it. So we're just going to latch this, give it a tumble. And let it hang out. We're going to close this off. We're not even going to think about it now for a few weeks. And then we'll come along and that chamber will get emptied first because it's the furthest along. And then this one will be not far behind it. And you see that's pretty full right now. You come back next week and look in this, it'll be half full. It's unreal. When I first did this out here, the gardeners were amazed. And I mean, that's probably the right way, that in 1 year we went from a pile of garden waste to really usable, nice compost. It just blew them away. And you know, it's great.
And with the garden waste, it doesn't matter if there's weed seeds in there. I mean, how are you,
Yep.
particular about what goes in for garden
I'm not.
waste?
I'm not. I mean, the only way to get rid of weed seeds and stuff is hot composting. But a garden this size, being out here, weed seeds from there or weed seeds from there, pick your fight. So we just tell the gardeners, use the compost. You're going to get some weeds, pull them out. And we have a knotweed problem here. This stuff is our mortal enemy. Years ago, that knotweed was all the way down to where my truck's parked. And we just kept mowing it and mowing it. And it's the only thing that'll get it. UVM did a study where they actually took some knotweed, broke open, you know how it's like a hollow bamboo thing, they opened up the thing and poured Roundup right down the throat of this thing. That was like num, num, num. Boy, that's good. Didn't even bother it. So their recommendation is mow on the 1st of the month, every month for 5 years to get rid of it. It'll still want to pop up. And that's how we got rid of it out here. We just mow regularly. It's unreal.
It is.
It's popping up in this pile. It's back there. So, yeah, it's our best friend. So what we have in our barrel is we have our little cup for our sawdust. We have gloves for the composters. We have, excuse me, I'm going to get this. We have a pair of scissors. These are the essential tools. Here, I brought this stuff for you guys. This one's mine. I'm just going to give this, it's for your chapter. I mean, you have access to all the same stuff, but I had it. Thought I could clean out a drawer this morning. So we have our record keeping in here. We have our carbon source in here. And again, we just use shavings. It's the same thing you get if you have chickens, you know, in the hen house. It's like $6 or $7 a bale. You can get it right at Garland's. It's packed tight. One bale, well, half a bale will just about fill that bucket. So it goes a long way. We have our gloves, our scissors, and we have our bio bags for the gardeners to use. Now, one of the things we have is all the gardeners here are on email. So that's how we communicate. So we had one of the gardeners was bringing their stuff in plastic bags. So I just had Rosa shoot out an email to everybody and said, hey, please, no plastic bags. They don't break down. And one of the gardeners admitted, well, it was me. I'm sorry. I didn't realize. But that's how we learn. And now he's aware that this is available to him. Plastic is your mortal enemy when you're composting. It's not good. So this is an aero bin. A-E-R-O-B-I. And this is another whole different way to compost. It's almost kind of like setting up a bin in layering. It's in a contained box. and it has 2 doors. This is one door right here, and there's one on the other side. And the advertisements show that when you're ready to open it, you pull this latch and beautiful black compost rolls out. We'll see. But the interesting thing about the aero bin is if you look inside here, you'll see 2 cones that are upside down. Come over, I want to take a picture.
Oh, sure.
And what these cones do is they allow air to get all the way down to the bottom of the bin. So there's like a center cone and then another cone. So the air travels down the middle of the aero bin to the bottom cone, and it's allowing air to get way down to the bottom of the bin. So this was ice cold the other day. I put the thermometer in, it was like 78 degrees. So it wasn't doing anything. So I added some food waste in here, some more inoculant, a little water, and we'll see if this starts heating up in a few days or so. So I have to get this one going.
So is this your first go round with this one?
Really, it's seriously, yes. We've had it here from the beginning, but we threw a few things in it and then kind of didn't do anything with it for a couple of years, and that stuff, it doesn't have any access to water, so it just sat in there, dried out. It wasn't doing anything. So I thought this year it would be good to get her going. So we got this little handy tool where you can just kind of put it in there, give it a twist, pull up. So you can see it's breaking down. It's starting. You can, if you do twist it, I gotta tell you guys, if you do twist it, don't twist it close to the doors, because I pulled the door right off with the twisty thing the other day, and all the compost spilled out all over the place. I said, well, that was brilliant.
That's why it was cold.
That's probably why it was cold. I threw some newspaper in there. You can see there. There's coffee grounds. My daughter has a little cafe in town, so I get her coffee grounds. And we'll see what it does. But it's definitely starting to break down. You can see that from down below. It doesn't smell, so that's good. So we'll just going to experiment with this a little bit and see what we can do with it.
How does this one compare cost-wise?
I think this was in the $200 area. Personally, my favorite is the Hot Frog. The thing works. It's a little workhorse. It's cheap, and 5 years in, and it's hanging, and we haven't had any trouble with it. It does have a little air vent on the side to get more air. Right there. I like that. We put a couple of these out in the community, and they seem to like them. You know, so we've heard, you know, secondhand that they work well for people. So I thought I'd give it a whirl this year and get it sparked up. So we'll wait to see that beautiful black compost come rolling out the bottom here.
How long do you anticipate that happening now?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer. But I'll probably in the fall, when we're ready to close up here, I'll probably open those doors and see what comes out. And then I'll learn. And I'll say, all right, well, this is what happened. I did this with the aero bin. What did I do? I forgot. Oh, I'll go to my notes. They're all right there about what I've been doing with the aero bin. Every single thing. So I can go to these and I can go, let's see here. Or Ken can come by, or Marcia. And go to the aero bin. And there's exactly what I've been doing with it every time I come and touch it. It's all written right there. So in the fall, if we open it up and nice beautiful stuff comes out, I have a record of what made that stuff come out. So I'll know. I'll say, oh, well, this seemed to work. Or if it doesn't come out, it's all rotten, gooey, and didn't work, I'll go, well, that wasn't a good plan. We'll have to try something else. But that's how you learn.
And are you using a similar recipe, so to speak, in here? Are you putting in carbon and
Yes.
water? And
Yes.
all
The recipe's always there, no matter what system you choose. If you choose an open bin system, and we're going to talk about this next, a closed system, I think that this is the closest to this, because this is layering. These are both layering. Those are tumbling. And those are just big piles I push around with a Kubota. So we'll see, but we'll learn. Remember, you can't do it wrong. So whatever system you incorporate, whatever you want to know or choose to try, if it's not working, adjust your recipe. You know, if it's stinky, something's off. If it's too wet and gooey, something's too wet and gooey. You know, change that. My wife threw 3 big jars of Hellman's mayonnaise in our barrel. We have big 50-gallon barrel spinners. And but the same system is out there. So we break down the food in the barrels, so it's not food anymore. Then it goes into our piles, and 3 years later it goes on the garden. Well, those 3 jars of mayonnaise completely gummed up the whole system. It was like adding 3 things of super cement. So whatever you're doing for composting, there's certain things you don't want to throw in there. Oils, dairy, meat, raw eggs, gooey things. Don't put gooey things in, you know. Somebody has a big thing of macaroni and cheese that they never finish. Don't put it in your compost. That stuff will bind up, and it's really, really hard to get that recipe back on track again.
So just vegetation, man. Just what
That's, you know, your food scraps are good. It's right there on the sign, will tell you.
Yeah. Okay.
Grass clippings are good if they haven't been treated with any chemicals. They're wonderful. Yeah, I mean, all kind. I threw newspapers in here. Newspapers are great. They're great.
Shredded.
If you can shred them, they're better. But if you have a system that's a little too wet, you can just take your newspaper, crumple it up, and throw it in. Crumple it up, throw it in. It's a wonderful.
How about your shredding?
Shredding's better. Yeah. All the inks are organic, so don't use colored, like shiny newspaper kind of stuff. But regular newspaper's fine. So then we have a bin system here. Now, I already explained how we're using it. We break down our food to non-food, and then we put it in the first bin over there to cure and break down passively before we put it in the middle bin, which is finished. But you can compost just having a bin system. Very first thing you'd have to consider is vector control. You'd have to come up with something to control access from animals and critters. And the first thing they'll tell you is hardware cloth. This is hardware cloth. It's not cloth, it's a metal screen. It's small enough so mice can't get through it. So if you were going to set up a bin system, what you probably would want to do is lay this on the ground, have a mat of that on the ground, and you're going to put your bins on this. And then you could wrap this around the sides, or you could have solid sides, but something to keep whatever from getting in and out easily. Again, I didn't set this up this way because we don't use it that way. But you could put down, okay, if you had your vector cloth down, say solid sides, the first thing you'd probably want to put down in here is something that can promote air from the bottom. Sticks, woody debris, wood chips. You don't want to start off with a heavy mat of food, but something that kind of lets air start from the bottom. And then start your layers, you know, put a layer of food scraps in and your carbon on top of it, or vice versa, and start layering up. As you get higher and higher and higher, because the thing is, this requires a lot of material to do this. A lot. You could pull off the front boards and you'll see down the bottom it's all really getting broken down quite nicely. It's still not up at top. And this will go down to this eventually. Then you turn it into the next one and start again. Then you turn this one into the third one and start again. But being here, we just didn't set it up that way because we were so concerned about vector control and attracting things to the garden that we don't want here. Because that's where they live. And so we came up with that system that if we break this down and it's not food anymore, it's not compost, but it can go in here, nobody's interested in it, nothing cares. It doesn't smell, even if something came in here, they're like, that's not even tasty, I'm going back out there to eat. There's better stuff out there. So that's why when I designed this, I made the 3-bin system thinking we were going to do that. But in reality, it just didn't seem to be practical. But you could do it. You can go online. There's, I don't know, anybody familiar with Charles Dowding? YouTube this guy. It's Charles Dowding, like Dow Jones, D-O-W-D-I-N-G, Dowding. He's from England, and he has a lot of information on composting in bins. He uses a 7-bin system, but the guy is just phenomenally knowledgeable, and it's very entertaining. He's an incredible gardener, but he has an incredible compost system that he'll show you how to do in a bin system if that's what you want to do. Yeah.
I had downloaded plans from Seattle Tilt for the 3-bin system, and it was easy to make, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought I'd
Yep.
share that. The Seattle Tilt site is a really nice source.
Yep. And you can make the bins out of anything. You can make them out of pallets. Get a bunch of pallets and make boxes from them.
I made them out of Trex.
There you go.
Yeah, fake Trex.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff that had been stained at Home Depot, and they said, "Oh, you wouldn't want that. It's stained." And I said, "Show me, give me a discount," and I did.
There you go.
And built those. And by the way, regarding putting food in directly, because I do direct, and yeah, I have a 1/2-inch hardware wire around it and between the bins. But we learned this from Ron Hebert back when he was teaching it. He says if you dig a hole in the middle of it,
Mm-hmm.
put your wet stuff, your smelly stuff down in the hole in the middle of it, and then mix it a little bit, cover it over. It won't smell from the outside, and the animals won't come, and it decomposes awfully fast, heats up really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And so I haven't had any trouble with bears. I know there are bears around,
Yeah, yeah.
and so far so good.
It depends on your
That's
site. It depends
3
on
years or so.
what
4, no.
what
8 years.
animals are
Yeah.
you urban or suburban or very rural? All those things come into play. I can't do that at home. We're very rural, and I have tried to cold compost, putting it in the middle, adding everything and its brother on top, and the next morning the food's all over the place. Do it again, next morning the food's all over the place. So I came up with my barrel system because I realized that I had to contain that somehow, and that's what works for us. Charles Dowding lives in England, and he doesn't have bears where he lives, or big critters. But again, whatever works for you. If you have they have a beautiful composting system up at the Charlottesville, is it Charlotte, Vermont. Charlotte, their elementary school, they have a barn, and the kids do it. It's just a beautiful composting system, but it's inside a barn. They can close the doors in the evening. That's that.
And for the winter, probably. For the winter.
And they go
Yeah.
all year round in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was wondering how people would compost in the winter.
Yeah, they go year round with it. They're totally into it. But it's a barn. It's enclosed. I don't know what you guys have in Rutland. If you have an enclosed area, is your compost?
No, it's wide open.
It's wide
So
open?
3 bins outside the building. So no, I'm not going to be doing anything there in the winter.
Yeah, right. So the challenges for that are going to be very different from the challenges out here for animals and vector control.
Different
stuff.
animals. Yeah.
We had a bear get into it. I have a big heavy-duty square frame with 2 50-gallon heavy-duty plastic barrels that screw top on, and you can spin them both independently. And I bragged for years about how bear-proof this system is, and many times I came out and I could see they tried to get in it. You could see their claw marks. It was in a different position from when I left it. I could see their footprints, but they couldn't get in it until this year. I came out, they pulled the whole thing down and ripped open one of those barrels. And I would have bet my truck that there's no way a bear could open one of those. Those heavy duty plastic polyethylene barrels. They're food grade. He ripped it right open. So, trust me.
If they're hungry and they smell food, they're going to get at it.
That's because I threw a chicken carcass in there. It was my fault, not his or hers. It was my fault. Yep. I said, this will break down. It won't be a problem. He went right to it. Yep. So that's why, stay away from the meat, dairy products, gooey things, oils, that kind of stuff you don't want that in your compost. And in Vermont, you can still throw away meat, in the landfills.
You can,
Yeah. So that's our system. I don't know what else to tell you guys. We built this to work for our gardeners. We built it just exactly for this reason right here, is to show people different ideas. And we've had gardeners go away, and some have bought this, some have bought this, some do this, some do that. But that's the whole idea, is for people to get ideas and take home whatever works for them.
Do you have resources for these particular bins that people could order on?
I'll email the information to Ken. So I'll get it from Rosa, where she bought them and so on and so forth.
Get them on Amazon.
Sure.
These are common.
Get anything on Amazon. Oh yeah, they're all over. These things are all over the place.
Oh, they're all over the place.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, just Google hot frog.
Actually, I
These
think
things
I
will
got
pop
mine
right
at
up.
Home Depot in Rutland.
Yeah, they're like $100 or $120
Yeah,
or something.
A little over $100.
Yeah, these are a little more expensive.
Yeah, those are pricey.
These are pricey. I did have a little trouble with this one. The side fell off one day. So you'll see there's a whole bunch of extra screws on each side. So I came down and rebuilt it. But it works great. They work fine. So they give us a lot of capacity. By the time we get these filled, this one's certainly ready to be emptied. Then this one will be ready to empty, and then we can start using the hot frog again. When this is all filled up, this will be ready to be emptied. So we found for our volume here at this garden with this amount of gardeners, these 4 chambers break down the food fast enough that we can put it into the curing bin here without any worries about animals or bears or anything.
How long does it take?
Well, this one, we switched over to this one a couple weeks ago, and that was completely full.
Oh, wow.
That was completely full. You couldn't get anything else in it.
That's amazing.
And look at it now.
Yeah.
So it's still a little gooey and stuff, so we'll let that sit in there for another week or so.
So about 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And then it goes in there.
Goes in there and it's,
That's amazing.
let it sit in there. It can sit in there for however. May sit in there for the whole season.
And then you use it the next
Then we'll
year.
flip this over into this one.
And then use it next year for gardening.
Yep, so when Marcia and Ken, their first day here, they flipped everything from here into here. And then we emailed the gardeners and said, bin 2, the middle bin is ready to go, come and get it. And they've been coming and getting it, putting it right on their gardens. Because, this certainly works great, but this is a much better quality compost. Because obviously, it's got way more goodies in it. But all the systems work. They work fine. So that's how we do it here. And again, it's it's an experiment. You might come and say, oh, that's too dry. That's too wet. Change it. That stinks. Change it. Change your recipe. You're never gonna just put stuff in and have a perfect recipe every time. One day you put too much nitrogen in, or you didn't put enough carbon, or vice versa, or it got too wet. Whatever. Those things just happen. So you can adjust them all the time. So as I said, I came down the other day and this was cold. So I added a little more inoculant in it. I added a little water, all these peanut shells, and today, what was it, 120 or something. So it's already getting up there and this chamber's starting to cook nicely. So I just changed it. That's what you got to do sometimes. And the aero bin will learn and figure that out. So at the end of the season, we'll have a good idea on what to do to make good compost in the aero bin. Yeah.
So if you're first starting out with a bin or however you wanted to do it, and you don't have inoculant, how do you get, or what do you use for inoculant if you don't already have?
Go find some dirt.
Just dirt.
Yeah, chuck it in there. That's about it. Yeah, you don't have to get, remember all the commercials for Rid-X for your septic tank? Get Rid-X and your septic tank will work and be healthy. You know what that is? It's a box of that stuff, pretty much. And then you're just introducing that to your septic system. When they come and pump your septic system, they always leave some in there, and that's to jumpstart the system again. So that's all you're doing, is you're just jump-starting your compost.
I have a question about coffee grounds.
Yeah.
You know, I have the pile in the backyard, and the coffee grounds, I have a thing in the house, okay, and the coffee grounds always made things soupy. So I really started putting the coffee grounds just right on the flower beds next to the house. Any benefit to having them in compost, yes or no?
I think yes.
Okay.
They're very, very rich in nitrogen. So if they're making a soup, you just add more carbon. But you know, despite their color,
Yeah.
coffee grounds is considered green for composting. So add something to dry them up a little bit, you know.
So
And-
shavings or straws?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, but they're very, very high in nitrogen. And I don't know, do your plants like it, or are they doing okay with it?
They're not dead yet. They're good. Yeah, it's only been a few weeks.
Okay.
And I space it out, you know. So, yeah.
Do
Yeah.
they decompose the coffee grounds
Yeah.
like in a pile, or they just become part of it? I have a ton of coffee grounds.
I love putting.
Oh, coffee grounds are great. Yeah, they're wonderful.
Before I started composting, I just threw my coffee grounds on the garden, and it was fine.
P.S. You can go to Starbucks
Even
and
the
get a bag of
filters.
Yeah,
coffee.
even the filters. Yeah,
Oh, yeah?
Do they charge you?
Is
No.
there a ratio that you would use? Or?
I would use my same carbon recipe, 3 to 1, and you know, again, monitor it. I'm just nervous. I mean, you guys are all gardeners. I'm just nervous about putting too high a nitrogen contents on anything. Yeah, I've learned the hard way over the years. And we've had farmers drop off manure here, that literally green manure. And you know, I've had to caution the gardeners, you know, don't use that. But in their mind, oh, look at fresh manure, and they want to go out and spread it all over their plots. Not a good idea.
Not a good idea.
So,
So do you test your soil here regularly, or?
nah,
No.
nope, never tested it.
Where's UVM?
Most enhanced soil's gotta be.
I know that. You should. I know all that, but we haven't. Just tell them to take more from that pile. That's good stuff there. Have at it.
The next demo.
But it seems to work out okay, you know. But you know, really fresh green manure, fresh stuff that's too high in nitrogen, I'm a little skittish about it. I'd like to see it personally. The way I garden is to let it break down a little bit before I'll put it on. I just feel better about that.
Would you put it on like a layer in the fall?
I'll put it. It's going to be compost. It's going to go through the composting system.
Compost
So
first, but you would never put like in the fall
No.
when the garden's all done. You wouldn't directly.
no,
put it
the
on.
only thing I put on my garden is finished compost. I don't till it. Finished compost and straw. That's it.
Do you do a cover crop in the winter?
Nope.
Live here and
And the reason I don't is because a lot of the cover crops have a really dense root system,
Right.
and when you want to get them out, now the fun begins.
Right, and it defeats the purpose, does it not?
It doesn't. I don't see the point of it.
Okay. Awesome.
I have.
I argue with my son about cover crop, and I don't till my garden.
Yeah,
and I feel like, ooh, does it need more structure and all that? You
it
know?
has structure. When you till it, you ruin the structure.
Exactly.
Yeah, you know, I don't till my potatoes. You know how I plant potatoes? My potato. This is the truth. I'm outside the garden. We have a fenced-in garden. Outside the garden, I took a plot. I said I'm going to grow potatoes here. I mowed the grass. I laid the seed potatoes on the grass, and I covered them with 12 inches of straw. And when the potatoes came up through the straw, I got more straw and built up around them. Instead of dirt, I'm using straw. I did it for the first time last year. We had a fantastic potato harvest.
Charlie Nardozzi heard that. He had that one.
Yes, yeah. That comes from Ruth Stout,
Oh.
who discovered this way to garden back in the 40s. And so this year I went out to my potato patch, which there's all the straw still sitting there. And I just kind of spread open the straw, got down to where that dirt was, because now the bottom of the straw and the top of what was the lawn is becoming a wonderfully fertile place. So I just made a little opening, put the seed potato in, put the straw back over it. Didn't even have to add any. They all came shooting up through in no time, and then I added another bale of straw all around them. So what I'm doing is I'm building that soil up from the bottom. I'm not disturbing it, and that grass is all dead now. There's no more grass in there. It needs sunlight and all that good stuff to photosynthesize. It doesn't have it. So I have a whole potato bed, which took me maybe 10 minutes. Literally. And never once did I dig a hole. And, you know, I used to do it the traditional way. You dig the trench, put the fertilizer in, put your potatoes in, and then hoe them all summer and hoe some more. Forget it.
Phil, you don't have to rotate potatoes?
I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, a lot of things were rotational things. If you have a really big gardens, I mean, if you're growing potatoes in a patch like the size of this garden, or anything, then you might want to start thinking about rotating and changing up, and you know, because that's going to cut down on diseases and pathogens that linger over and all that stuff. But if you have little plots and backyard gardens and stuff, you really don't need to do that. You can,
Right.
but I don't see the need. I've been growing the same stuff in the same plots in our garden for almost 40 years, and I have no pests. The only thing I ever really had that I couldn't control was asparagus beetles. Couldn't get rid of them, so I got rid of the asparagus. I did. I pulled it all out. Said it just doesn't want to be here, you know. I don't have potato beetles. I don't have. I have
Do you
nothing.
have cabbage moss
So far, I haven't.
on your queue? Those are so hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
They come back every year.
Yeah, I've been lucky. I don't know, but I just do it as clean and organic as I can, and I don't disturb the soil, and everything seems to like it, so I stick with it.
So what is the theory of putting the compost on in the fall? What does it do while over the winter?
What the compost is going to do, it's going to break down from the bottom. So that layer between the soil and you add the compost on it, right there, that compost is feeding the soil right at that point and breaking down. So you're going to, all of your bacteria is going to get in there, and if it's woody enough, you're going to have mycelium come in there, and all that good stuff is happening right between those two layers. So when you go to garden, you're going to plant right in that layer. And remember, compost isn't fertilizer. Compost feeds the soil, and the soil feeds the plants. That's how it works. And every year you do it, you just add more and more.
When you say you've got wood chips or whatever, but we don't put them in here, so
No,
you don't need it if it's food.
you don't need it. The wood chips, their main job is to provide carbon and aeration. So that's why I mixed a lot of wood chips into this pile, is to aerate it and get rid of some of those wood chips from that big pile. But that's what its job is.
Yeah.
And they'll take much longer to break down, of course. But so what? So what if you take some of this compost and there's some wood chips in it? So what? I see a peanut shell in there. So what? Throw it on your garden. Put it right on there. They love this stuff. I mean, that's just wonderful. I love it. So yeah, if it's too big, throw it back in the bin and let it go through again. Because when we did it, we were finding corn cobs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, we found quite a few things in there.
Yeah. Because ideally, the other part that I don't have here, I have this little block, and I have a hatchet to chop up stuff, but I really don't use it. I just chuck it in there. Sometimes I'll cut it up with the scissors if I can. But I took the hatchet away because I just thought it was one of those things that are going to attract kids. Never mind bears, but kids. And they come down here occasionally and hang out. We've been fortunate. We haven't had any incidents, but nothing like a hatchet sitting there and a kid looking at it. So I didn't think it was that necessary. So that's how we do it here, and we change it if we have to, or we try new things, and all of these systems work. So everybody's place, whether it's a school or a community garden or the Rutland Fairgrounds or your backyard, has something here could accommodate that. The only real composting that we don't do here, of course, is commercial stuff. The big stuff where you have pipes running air under the piles and all that stuff. That's a whole different. This is for just old hippies like me that want to make some nice compost. And it works. Yeah.
In a fit of over enthusiasm, I had bumper stickers printed. Because I had one on my car before I moved here, and I had to get rid of the car, and the bumper sticker went with it, and I couldn't live without it.
I love it.
So I've got extras if anybody wants to have
Well,
one.
I am
That's
definitely
awesome.
in the.
Yeah.
I would like to have one of those.
Yeah. Okay.
That's
Here,
so
just,
great.
you can hand them out to whomever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna steal one from you.
Okay. Good. Anybody else?
That's so nice of you.
Well, I just couldn't live without them, and
I
so
love
I
it.
thought I
Thank
would.
you.
Well,